Welcome to the Norris Group Real Estate Podcast, a show committed to bringing you insights from thought leaders shaping the real estate industry. In each episode, we'll dive into conversations with industry experts and local insiders, all aimed at helping you thrive in an ever-changing real estate market, continuing the legacy that Bruce Norris created, sharing valuable knowledge, and empowering you on your real estate journey. Whether you're a seasoned pro or a newcomer, this is your go-to source for insider tips, market trends, and success strategies. Here's your host, Craig Evans.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are excited to be on today. We have got a great show today. I'm excited. We've got John Schaub with us. John is a real estate investor and a mentor. John has prospered during 3 recessions, 4 tax law changes, and interest rates ranging from 6 to 16% in his 35 years as a real estate investor. His 2016 best-selling book, Building Wealth, One House at a Time, second edition, assisted more than 100,000 real estate enthusiasts on their way to successful investing. John recommends buying better, well-located houses rather than cheaper houses and other management-intensive properties. Better houses are more profitable and far less trouble. He advocates paying off debt, owning properties free and clear, and renting only to long-term, high-quality tenants. John buys, sells, and manages his own properties and enjoys providing quality housing at fair prices for working families in his community. He teaches Building Wealth One House at a Time seminar each year where students learn how to identify the best investment property in their town, how to buy it at below market prices, and how to negotiate terms that guarantee a profit. John also invests his time helping those who cannot afford to buy a home through conventional sources through his work with Habitat for Humanity and the Fuller Center for Housing. John has served for more than 20 years on the board of Sarasota Habitat, 7 years on Habitat's International Board, and currently serves as the past chair of the board of the Fuller Center for Housing. John, a Florida native, is a proud graduate of the University of Florida, where he earned his BA from the College of Business Administration in 1970. He's an accomplished boat captain, power and sail, a fisherman, a skier, and an instrument-rated pilot. John loves to travel, especially with his wife, Valerie, and their young adult children. John, again, we talked a little bit before we started, but, man, I am really appreciative to have you on and just to get the opportunity to talk with you today, my friend.
Hey, always a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Greg.
Well, listen, you are you are a favorite of the Norris Group. You've been on with Bruce a lot. Everybody knows you. You know, you've been on the show many times. But it's your first time with me as the CEO of the Norris Group now. So, we've been working hard on how we build a bi-coastal audience, so some of which is very new. So if it's okay, what I'd like to do is just touch on your life before real estate for you and what led you kind of into real estate first off, if that's okay with you.
Sure. First thing I need to do is update my biography. So, I've been around more than 35 years, although 35 sounds like a good age to me. I started right out. I graduated from college in 1970, and I jumped into the real estate business right out of college. And actually, I sold an apartment building while I was going to college. I was managing this building in Gainesville, Florida, where I went to school. And a fellow came along one day and wanted to buy it. So I called the owner and asked him if he'd sell. And he said, sure. And so I put that deal together and made a commission while I was still in college. And I took that money and learned how to fly. That's where I found my love for flying is right there until I ran out of money. Then I had to do something else. But I jumped right into the real estate business right after that. My first job was selling houses because I didn't have a license. And then I got my license and I started selling land, lots to build on. And then I had a couple of really good years doing that. Then I started buying stuff. So I've been buying pretty much full time since the early 70s.
Well, so let me back up because you're in Sarasota now, right? So where were you originally from?
Right here, right here.
Okay,
I
so
moved
you're
here when I was 6 years old. I mean, I was born up north in St. Petersburg, 30 miles away, but I've been here since I was 6.
but so you're one of the Florida unicorns, one of the ones that's actually from Florida then.
Yeah, and so are all my children
Wow.
and all my grandchildren.
Well, so you started touching on, early on in college, things like that, finding ways to be entrepreneurial. Uh, Were you that way as a kid? I mean, where do you think that came from? Like, growing up, where did that start for you?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I used to, I had a paper route. I used to rake leaves and mow grass, but I didn't get serious about work, I think, until probably into college. And I did a lot of manual labor in college and learned that I didn't want to do that when I grew up. I worked in some restaurants, washing dishes, and worked at Sears for a while, selling hardware. And there are a lot of jobs that I had that were all short term. And I learned I didn't want to do any of that stuff. I wanted to do something much more exciting than that. And I got a ride one day with a fellow who had a Beach Bonanza, which is a type of an airplane. Some people would know about it. And
Yep.
I said, when I grow up, I want one of these, and I want to do what this guy does. And he was a real estate developer. And then I watched him go broke, and I said, maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I just want the airplane, but not go broke. And I had another fellow who was my mentor. His name was Warren Harding. And Warren took me around town one time, and he showed me all the properties he used to own. And I said, Warren, why didn't you keep it? And he said, well, I wish I had. So I started learning that the people who were successful and had money bought something and held on to it. They just didn't buy it and sell it and have a story. They bought something and held on to it. So I started buying things and holding on to them. And I had all sorts of stuff. I bought a motel and apartment buildings and a bunch of duplexes and houses and a restaurant and a wine and cheese store. So I had a lot of plates spinning when I was getting started here, trying to figure it out. And I evolved after a while. I ran into my buddy Jack Miller, who had just been buying houses. And I said, what he's doing makes sense. And at that time, I had 13 or 14 houses, I guess. So I started buying more houses. And over time, we upgraded our portfolio. I started off like most people do, buying cheap houses with low down payments, trying to squeeze some cash flow out of them. But they were a lot of work, and they were high maintenance, took a lot of my time. So I wanted to be more passive. I looked around at my banker friends who went to work at 9, left work at 4, and then played golf 3 days a week. I wanted to be like them, not work so much. So
Right.
we got into better and better houses. And then we went through several recessions. The first one was rough on me because I'd never seen one before. I thought I knew what I was doing. Then we had a recession. But by the time we had the second one, which was back in the early 80s, I was ready. I bought a whole bunch of property in the early 80s, and I still have most of it. And I kept buying, and have been buying ever since, and still buy. And I haven't bought anything in a couple of years because our prices just went nuts here over the last 2 years. But they're settling down now, and a lot more property on the market today than there was a couple of years ago. A lot more rentals on the market than a couple of years ago. So we're back to kind of a normal market, I think, more normal than it has been for sure. And even with interest rates at 6%, people are starting to get used to that. And I'm real used to that because all my life interest rates were more than 6%. I never saw 6% interest till recently. So a lot of the houses we bought had 10, 12, even 14% loans on them, and we made it work. So I know you can make it work at 6% or higher. And people who are waiting for it to go back to 3% may have a very long wait. I'm not sure that's going to happen anytime soon, if ever.
Well, and that just comes back to how you're buying that product, what you're buying and how you're buying it. Because there's so many people, for me as a builder, that I'm coming in, they want to do a build to rent situation right now. Like you say, with the cost of building where it's at, it just doesn't pencil out. At the end of the day, there's not enough meat on the bone to make that work.
Well, there'll be more meat on the bone if the builders have a lot of inventory and they can't sell it, because then prices will get better. And I'm seeing a lot of that in this town. I see people who are doing spec houses, and they've got spec houses up that have been sitting there now for 90 days, 120 days, and that's not what they're used to. They're used to having those houses sold before they finish them. Well, that may change. And back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, when I bought a number of properties, typically they were in markets where builders had a lot of inventory, because I bought a lot of new houses. I like new houses. I'm not hoping the builders get in trouble. I have all the best wishes for you, Craig, but when they do get in trouble, the problem I have around here is the inventory that are building is more expensive. Nobody's
Right.
building the house like my houses. My houses are 3 bedroom, 2 bath, double car garages on quarter-acre lots, and they're all about 14, 15, 1,600 square feet. And that house, you can still build that house, but people aren't building it because the lots are more expensive now.
Right.
Most of them, and I've been telling people this for a long time. I said, when you buy real estate, it's really the lot that's going up in value more than the house. Houses wear out. A 50-year-old house is not as good as a brand new house. It's a different design. People would much rather have a brand new house just because it's just kitchens are so different than they were 50 years ago. So if you're looking to buy a house today, they're going to be new, modern, bigger, and more expensive, and they're going to be more expensive.
Yep.
But you can
Yep.
still make the numbers work if you finance it right.
Well, so let me jump back into something because I'm from Georgia originally,
I'm sorry.
and well, listen, I wasn't gonna say anything when I heard that you graduated from Florida. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're beating up on us really well now, so it comes around.
that's right. We changed that mantle. Everybody rides that mantle for a little while, right? We're
That's
getting
right.
to carry the mantle right now. I'll take
Yeah,
it.
yeah. You're right.
Um,
Go get them.
but in your bio, we talked about the volunteer aspects that you take on, and obviously being from Georgia, Habitat's a big thing in Georgia, and everybody knows Habitat for Humanity, especially in the state of Georgia and all over the country. Carter did a great thing with what he was doing with that. But I guess my question is, you had done so much with that. Did you ever get to work with President Carter?
Yeah, Habitat was started by Millard Fuller and his wife back in the 70s, and he got Carter involved after he retired as president in the 80s, early 80s. And
Right.
I was involved with Carter quite a bit. I chaired the development committee for the Habitat International Board, which is a fundraising committee. So we worked together raising money. Every year, President Carter and Mrs. Carter would come out and build houses for us. We'd have a 1 week Blitz week, we called it Carter Week. And I often worked on the same house as President Carter. The most interesting year we had, I was working on the house, and Newt Gingrich showed up. So they put Newt with me, and President Carter and Rosalind Carter stayed on the porch because they had nothing to talk about. And Newt talked my ear off for a whole day. He didn't hammer many nails, but he talked a lot. But the thing about Habitat was it did bring people together. Everybody could agree on a couple simple things. That is, people need a place to live. And if you can build it efficiently and make it affordable for them, it's good for people. It helps more. In the way I looked at it, I tried to get the government out of the housing business. I think the government does a miserable job most of the time. So by building houses, and we started off here when I was president in Sarasota, we started off, just building 2 houses, and we thought maybe that's all we do. And now we've built almost 200 houses here in Sarasota, another 200 in the town next to us, another 200 in the town the other way. So we've built almost 600 houses right around here now. And that's fantastic. That's 600 families, and you multiply that times 3 kids each. That's 1,800 kids living in decent houses, and they don't get evicted. If they take care of the house will last forever, and they'll pass it down to their kids. So it does make a difference.
That's right.
And there's a lot of charities that make a difference. Habitat's certainly one of them. The Fuller Center for Housing, which is another one we started, is doing the same thing. Reaching down to people who make even less money than the Habitat people most of the time.
Yep. Well, so you've also listed a bunch of stuff that you enjoy doing. Boating, fishing, skiing, flying, all of that. So I guess on the personal side for our listeners, you're in a great place in Sarasota. There, water's great. Do you get out on the water often?
All the time. I'm in my backyard. I'm looking right out in the backyard at 2 boats right now. I'm itching to get on. So going for a boat ride this afternoon. I'm going flying tomorrow morning. So, I have a great life. I can't complain about a darn thing. My health is good. We've had success. And part of that success, of course, is the nonprofit work, which I got into at least half time back in the 80s and still involved. And my kids grew up here in town. And now I have 5 grandkids. So I have absolutely nothing to complain about. And real estate has been very good to all of us.
So, one of the things that we've got a lot of employees in our companies and that I own and stuff. And one of the things while we work hard, I try to really stress to our team that, you've got to have a balance of what you do with your work life and your family. And, there's nothing more important to me than my family, So I guess the question is, I hear you talking about the balance of stuff that you're doing between, just playing and still being involved in real estate. I know you still teach. And so, but has work, kind of a work-life balance, if you want to, has that always been a big part of the makeup of you? Or have you had the phase where you're like, come hell or high water, I'm going hard? Or walk me through that process of your life.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. I started teaching back in the mid 70s with my buddy Jack Miller. And back then, we owned a bunch of properties. I had a staff, and I would leave town and teach a class, sometimes two classes, and come back. And I found that just in maybe an hour or so after coming back, after being gone for a while, I can get all caught up. So I learned that it doesn't take a lot of time to do what I do if you're efficient. If you just get at it. And so real estate investing is very much like that. That you can you be a full time investor. We had at one time close to 100 properties. Now I had a staff. I had full time bookkeeper and secretary, a handyman, but I still managed everything. I did all the tenant selection. If there's a problem, I'd take care of it. And you can do that and still have a real life. Now we're down to fewer properties, and so I've encouraged people, if you've read my book. And by the way, I rewrote it 2 years ago, so there's a new edition out. There's a third edition out, so if you buy one, get the new edition, because the first book was written before a recession. It was written before COVID, so this one's got a lot more information. We learned a lot during the COVID years and during the recession back 14 years ago. I've always encouraged people, though, in the book and in my classes, not to buy too much stuff. People go out and they have somebody. We had one guy go out. I won't tell you his name, but he went out and bought 100 houses in a year. Well, that's a big year, and I know a lot of people have bought 100 houses in a year. Not a lot, but few have. But at the end of the year, he hadn't done nothing else. And the sad part of the story is he wasn't able to keep them, because managing 100 houses is a whole bunch different than buying 100 houses. Yeah. The buying is actually the easy part. People don't understand this, but the buying is the easy part. Taking care of them, making sure they work, paying the bills, making sure you have cash flow to pay the bills. That's the challenging part. So I teach people and encourage people just to buy one house at a time. And that's why the name of my book is Building Wealth One House at a Time. You don't need to go out and buy 20 houses your first year. In fact, if you do, you're making a big mistake, because you're not as smart as you think you are. But if you buy one house and then you study what you did and learn from that experience, and then next time you buy a house, do a little bit better job, maybe a little better price, maybe better terms, maybe a better neighborhood, maybe a better house, but you keep getting a little bit better at it. So at the end of 5 years or so, maybe you've bought a half a dozen houses, but every one you bought, you made a little bit better deal and bought a little bit better house. That way you end up with a portfolio of good properties, and you learn how to manage them one at a time. If somebody dumps 6 houses on you and you've never rented a house before in your life, you probably won't get 6 good tenants. And if you end up with half good and half bad, and 3 bad tenants, that'll drive you crazy. So the key to success in this business is first of all, is perseverance. It's been around for 10 years, hanging on to properties that are in good areas for a while, because the government will take care of you if you hold on to stuff. And they'll take care of you because we're going to have inflation. We've had inflation ever since I started this operation. And I put a chart in my book back in 1975 showing what 5% inflation would do with prices and rents and cost of everything. And you can go back and look at that 1975 chart. It is spot on. We've averaged 5% inflation since 1975. And maybe that'll change now, but I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that we're going to continue to have inflation. And you can come back in 20 more years and you're going to find that everything costs more. And it's not that it's more valuable, but it's going to be denominated in dollars differently. The dollar keeps going down in value. So if you can buy an asset, and Warren Buffett and I are certainly in agreement on this one. If you buy an asset like a house with a fixed rate mortgage and fixed payments and hold on to it for a long time, your rents will go up, your prices will go up. And, you don't have to be a genius to make a lot of money at this business, but you do have to buy a few houses. And some of my most successful students have just bought 3 or 4 houses. I mean, they didn't buy a whole bunch. They just bought a couple and they held on to them. And my most successful students are in Southern California. They're in Orange County. They're in San Diego. Some of them are in San Francisco. And they've only bought 4 or 5 houses, but those houses that they paid, $100,000 for are now worth $2 million. Well, you got 5 houses
Right.
worth $2 million apiece. You've got some change, and so it doesn't take a whole bunch. Now, if you live in Georgia or Mississippi or North Florida, it takes more.
That's right.
Because the houses just aren't as expensive, and they're not going to go up as much. But you'll get more cash flow. And I'm really not making fun of anybody, but it's cheaper to live here. It's cheaper to live in Florida and Georgia, and North and South Carolina, and Mississippi, and than it is in California or Washington D.C. or Boston. The big cities are a lot more expensive. So you can get by with just a few houses, no matter where you are, and have a very comfortable lifestyle, and not be working 40 hours a week or 80 hours a week like you'd have to if you're running a McDonald's or a Pizza Hut or go out and have a real job. You'd have to work a lot more than I do.
All right, that's going to do it for part 1 with John Schaub today. We'll see you next time.
For more information on hard money loans, trust deed investing, and upcoming events with the Norris Group, check out thenorrisgroup.com. For more information on passive investing through the DBL Capital Real Estate Investment Fund, please visit dblcapital.com.
The Norris Group originates and services loans in California and Florida under the California DRE license 01219911, Florida Mortgage Lender license 1577, and NMLS license 1623669. For more information on hard money lending, go to thenorrisgroup.com and click the hard money tab.